Within a relatively short period of time, the Dolphins lost both Calais Campbell and Terron Armstead for the 2025 season. And while their impact on the field will be missed, I think their impact off of the field will be missed just as much, if not more. The Dolphins have a self proclaimed problem with leadership and tardiness. Mike McDaniel said in his post game press conference that the Dolphins needed to be a little bit more mature when it comes to being a player led team. He cited that certain players were chronically late to meetings and they didn't always show up on time. And that kind of thing resonates with how the team respects its leaders, particularly the head coach. So Mike McDaniel said they tried fines and other things to instill some discipline on the team, but it didn't work. Now, having said that, the Dolphins still had those issues with discipline, even with Calais Campbell and Terron Armstead on the team. So it's not like just having those guys on the team meant that it was a change in behavior for some of these players who were not following team rules. Obviously, it's deeper than that. So Mike McDaniel has to dig deeper into himself and pull out whatever means by which he can lead this team by showing them that discipline matters, that being on time matters, that being a professional matters. And these are the things that Mike McDaniel has to convey to the team somehow. Now, I'm not sure if he can do that. He does have some guys who are veteran leaders on the team that he could probably lean on. Guys like Jalen Ramsey is an older player, he's accomplished in this league. A guy like Sieler, he's played well last season. I even voted him for the Dolphins defensive MVP in my video about the Dolphins' best performers of 2024. So I believe that those guys can lead on the field. There's no question about that. No one practices harder than Jalen Ramsey. No one gives more effort on game day than Sieler. But I'm not sure if those guys are vocal leaders that the team would need in order to help with this maturity issue. Now, the other guy on the team who's very talented, very accomplished, and has been on the team for a few years and been in the league for quite a few years is Tyreek Hill. Obviously, you would think that he should be the kind of guy who would lead the team in 2025, but recently Tyreek Hill had another issue related to a domestic incident, and that's not good, right? You don't want your team leader to be involved with things off the field. I mean, he already had issues prior to coming to the Miami Dolphins. Those are already well documented. I don't want to talk about those. But since he's been on the Dolphins, there was an issue with the yacht. There was an issue with the Instagram model. There was an issue with a domestic disturbance. There was an issue with the police in terms of being pulled over. Now there's an issue with another domestic incident. So the Tyreek Hill is not the kind of guy that you would expect to be a leader in 2025. As a matter of fact, you don't expect him to be a leader at all by any stretch of the imagination. So the Dolphins need to have a plan in place to fill the void that those guys left, because if this team had a problem with maturity and leadership, again, being a player-led team as described by Mike McDaniel, then if these issues were present with those guys on the roster, I can only imagine what it would be like once they're now off the roster. So the Dolphins have to find a way to be able to fill that void. And I don't know if it's going to come from the coaching staff. I don't know if it's going to come from the front office. I'm not really sure where it was going to come from. There's no one that they can sign in the free agency or even draft that's going to come in there and change the culture of the team. So it has to be someone on the team that's either been there for the last few years or even someone who's been there for the last year or two. And the Dolphins, I'm not sure what plan they have in place, but hopefully they have a plan to fill that void, because without leadership and discipline, it's hard to imagine how the Dolphins will have any tangible amount of success in the 2025 season. As far as Mike McDaniel's concerned, he hired some new coaches on the coaching staff. And again, I don't think those guys necessarily will make an impact, but he does have a defensive coordinator in Anthony Weaver, who was interviewed for head coaching positions in the NFL. So clearly, the fact that he got those interviews would suggest that people around the league view him as being leadership material. You don't get interviewed for a head coaching job if you don't have the qualities to be a leader, right? So I believe that Anthony Weaver can probably help Mike McDaniel in some ways, if not on the defensive side of the ball. Certainly, he'd be able to give some input somewhere into how to get these players to respect him. But as we can see from the outside, and we can't tell, we're not in the locker room with these guys. We don't interact with these guys day to day. So I have no idea what the team feels about Mike McDaniel. But the fact that Mike McDaniel chose to discuss this during the end of season press conference is very telling. Most teams want to keep that kind of information in house and adjust how they deal with those players accordingly. But Mike McDaniel was frustrated enough that he went out there and called the players out, not individually, but he called them out as a group as to not being on time and participating in meetings when they should. So that's kind of out of character for Mike McDaniel, right? He doesn't go out there and call out players, whether individually or as a group. It's just not his style from what we've seen. So Mike McDaniel already seems to be at least knowledgeable that something has to change in his approach to how he handles the team. And maybe it started out with that press conference, right? Maybe that was the first sign that things will be different in 2025 as it relates to how he does with these players. But this is where the Dolphins find themselves in right now, a situation where their superstar player got into another incident once again. And, his future with the team now seems to be a little bit tenuous. Can the Dolphins do something on draft day? I made a video about the Dolphins and the possibility of trading Tyreek Hill and what it would look like for the Miami Dolphins. In that video, I outlined some of the trades that took place of number one wide receivers and how some teams fared before trading away their number one wide receiver and how they fared after they traded him away. So the Dolphins need to take a look at what the team will look like after Tyreek Hill if they decide to move on from him. And let's face it, this is the last year that Tyreek Hill has guaranteed money on his contract. It's kind of foolish for them to give him a contract extension last season when he was under contract for 3 more years. It didn't really make much sense. But I guess maybe he or his agent kind of strong-armed the team, and now he has a situation where he has this guaranteed money that's due to him that will cause serious cap liabilities for the Dolphins if they decide to move on from him before June 1st. Now, after June 1st, it's a little bit more palpable, but before June 1st, it will really put a strain on their salary cap for the 2025 season. So the Dolphins have to figure out what direction they would like to go with their number one wide receiver. And if in fact they decide to move on from him, can Jalen Waddle take that step to being the guy who can replace Tyreek Hill? Remember, before Tyreek Hill was traded to the Dolphins, Jalen Waddle was the de facto number one wide receiver. And in his first year with Tua Tagovailoa, he broke some rookie records for the Miami Dolphins and also some league records as well. So when he's healthy and he's available, he can be productive. Can he be the gravity in the offense that Tyreek Hill is for the Miami Dolphins currently? I doubt that. I don't think he's that good of a player, but he might be a guy they could be able to lean onto a little bit more than they have since Tyreek Hill has been acquired to the Dolphins. But can they move on from Tyreek Hill? Can they lean more on Jalen Waddle and maybe spread the targets that Tyreek Hill used to get amongst Jonnu Smith, Devon Achane, and Jalen Waddle, and just become a better team, not just on the field because they'll be spreading the ball around like some other teams did. You look at Kansas City after they moved on from Tyreek Hill. They also distributed the ball around a little bit. They became a better team on offense and defense as a result of that. The Bills emulated the same kind of thing, almost like copy and paste. They became a better team after moving on from Stephon Diggs. Maybe the Dolphins can have the same result. They have talent on the offensive side of the ball. They're working on rebuilding the offensive line. But the most important thing is that the Dolphins really want to change the identity of their team. And moving on from Tyreek Hill is probably the best way to do that for 2025. Now, I'm not saying they'll do it. It's not likely they will at this point. Obviously, his trade value would be at an all-time low right now because of his age, all of the incidents off the field, plus his salary. You're not getting anything for a player when you try to trade someone with that much baggage. But from a psychological standpoint, from a team standpoint, imagine how much energy the Dolphins can put in other aspects of their team if they didn't have to deal with Tyreek Hill. With every couple of months that pass, something happens with Tyreek Hill. He had the unfortunate incident prior to the start of the season when he was detained. Then he had the other incident where at the end of the season, he quit on the team and some of his teammates called him out. Now you have this domestic incident where, he had an issue within his home, but it's an ongoing thing with Tyreek Hill. He always has to be managed. He's always saying things to the press that, you kind of question whether he's committed to the team or not. He does things that make you question whether he's committed to the team or not. So the Dolphins are a bit of a crossroads here, in my opinion. They have to decide what they want to do with Tyreek Hill. And if they do move on from Tyreek Hill, what kind of a team they would like to be going forward. So that's it for this video. If you like this video, hit the like button and hit the subscribe button to get all the latest content. And leave a comment in the section below. And as always, I'll see you in the next video.